There are three clubs in world football who can do what they want financially. Man City, PSG, and of course, Newcastle United. Now, that was a quote that Jurgen Klopp said a couple of seasons ago. As we know, Newcastle had new owners from Saudi, joining the likes of Man City and PSG, who are effectively run by states. But as we know, things are not rosy on Tyneside, because as we saw this week, they could have more financial implications, meaning Newcastle's rise and progression when it comes to joining the elite stardom of clubs in world football may have been hampered. But the question is, how bad actually is it? Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Sani-That sports guy, and of course today we're speaking sport, we're speaking football, and in particular we're speaking Newcastle United, because as we know, financially they are in a very dire situation. Premier League's profit and sustainability rules indicate how you are only allowed losses of £105 million over 3 seasons. Newcastle are teetering on the edge, and as we know, the fines and penalties that Everton and Nottingham Forest had received could happen to Newcastle, dampening their progression when it comes to their project. Next season's allowance is somewhat dampened already, as we know. Lewis Hall's loan's probably going to be made permanent, being £28 million, but they need to do more than that. This project they've got in Newcastle is dependent on them having success, not necessarily straight to the top to begin with, but showing signs of progression year on year. As we know, last season they overachieved getting into the top 4 and were definitely ahead of schedule. It did mean this summer they were definitely a more lucrative option for many players. Harvey Barnes, for example, came in, Sandro Tonali, Lewis Hall, but it hasn't really worked out for those recruits. Harvey Barnes has been injured, as we know. Tonali had his betting issues, and Lewis Hall hasn't really impressed either. And with this season, they've experienced a lot of struggle, especially when it comes to injuries, in terms of how they've actually performed, especially in the league as well. We all know they didn't make it out of the Champions League group, but that group was very, very tough. But it doesn't really look like they'll be making Champions League next season as well, and that will obviously impact revenue, because if we see last season they had revenue of £250 million. That was a staggering jump from the 70 million previously. But if we compare Newcastle and contextualize it in terms of the Premier League, they sit so far behind even the big six. Spurs made £444 million, which Newcastle are still way behind. It's great seeing growth when it comes to revenue, a lot of it obviously due in part due to sponsorship deals or Champions League revenue, for example, or broadcasting money. But the problem is there was a £73.4 million loss recorded. All this money is great, but they can't really recoup a lot of it when they have so many outgoings. Hence why this transfer window, you actually saw the likes of Kieran Trippier and Callum Wilson having a lot of links to foreign clubs. Bayern Munich were interested in Kieran Trippier. Atletico Madrid were interested in Callum Wilson. I am surprised Newcastle didn't actually say no to at least one of them. Now, don't get me wrong, they're two very important pieces when it comes to Eddie Howe's side. However, they're both on the wrong side of 30, and although they are class players, they still need to find players who fetch a good value when it comes to the transfer market. Otherwise, these losses are going to get to the level where they actually break the profit sustainability rules. No one can deny the great job Eddie Howe's done. He effectively inherited a relegation side and basically transformed them, despite the fact that the players he had didn't really have that much value when it came to the transfer market. The only player he's really had that's actually fetched, you could call, a somewhat premium when it comes to the market was Alan Saint-Maximin, who obviously went to Saudi Arabia. But again, that's very caveated, because Saudi Arabia are going to be spending ridiculous money on pretty much anyone when it comes to their projects. The other complications are a lot of the players they actually have in their squad who could potentially fetch some value are 30-something. Abian Shah, Dan Burn, Miguel Almiron. They're all going to be on the wrong side of 30. Now, I'm not saying when you go 30, you're going to be receiving your pension already, but your value pre-30 definitely is going to be higher than post-30. And with Newcastle in dire need of money, it might have made sense for Newcastle to take a bid from a Bayern Munich when it came to Kieran Trippier, because they may never actually receive a bid that is high as that. And I think with Livramento as his deputy, that's a pretty good successor in my opinion. However, there are other positions that, let's say they did work out and try to sell, you still need to replace them adequately, which is going to cost a premium. Because although the likes of Isak and Guimaraes are great players, if you were to sell them for a premium to help balance the books, how would you be able to replace them? When you have your greatest assets, you can't just sell them and expect for you to be at the same level if you don't replace them. Arsenal had this problem for ages. Now, we all know why that was, because they had to pay off the stadium. But if you're selling your best assets, be that Van Persie, Nasri, Fabregas, and you replace them with the likes of Shamak, it's not going to be conducive for your project. And the fact that Wenger actually made top 4 consistently goes to show what a great job he done. Eddie Howe is facing a similar issue here. Newcastle this season compared to last season is a stark difference. Although, yes, it is caveated, especially with a lot of injuries. And the fact that other clubs such as Liverpool have actually progressed a lot further this season, as well as Villa. No one can deny it's been difficult for them. And in order for you to progress, you need better players. This is definitely going to be a hurdle for Newcastle thus far in their project. And you might be thinking, oh, but look at Chelsea. How have they managed to get away with it? If you look at the way Todd Boehly and Chelsea have actually navigated through that, a lot of the academy players that they've actually sold have brought a profit. If you put that in the accounts, that's a plus for them. And when they buy players, a lot of them are in installments. And secondly, when it comes to the contracts, they're all amortized over a couple years, which means that they filter through the accounts, as opposed to putting it straight on the accounts. Newcastle don't really have a plethora of players that they had through the academy and sold them on. The biggest one, I think, being Sean Longstaff. But Eddie Howe likes that Geordie contingent in his team, and selling players such as Sean Longstaff and Lewis Miley, I think, would go against his ethos. But it is a delicate situation because the Saudis have a lot of ambition. Newcastle as a whole is a very important project for them. They need to see milestones, but this season's a massive hurdle because although on the field they haven't exactly had the best time on it, but off it is where they'll have their biggest concerns. Thank you very much for watching, guys. It's a really interesting topic because, as we know, Newcastle last season flying, this season fine, hasn't been the best, but financially is where it's all at. And I know people are going to talk about FFP and Manchester City's 115 charges, etc. But if we just look at Newcastle alone, this project is important for them and, of course, Saudi Arabia as well. It's a staple of what they're trying to do in the world. And if they don't really get what they want when it comes to Newcastle in terms of success, it's a bad look for them as a whole. Will they sell players? Will they keep players? It's a massive juggling act because at the end of the day, if they don't do that, then they need to be making more money, which they're not right now. Those will come in time, but right now it's not happening. And ultimately, the manager is someone who will take a lot of the blame, even though it's very unfair. And if Eddie Howe does navigate himself out of this tough situation, then is a testament to how good he is as a manager as well. But as always, thank you very much for watching. Make sure to drop a like, a comment, share with your friends and family. Subscribe if you're new to the channel as well. And as always, until next time, peace.